You should make friends, Twilight. College isn't just for studying, it's a whole package. Don't avoid the social scene just because some dusty old book is calling your name. There you are, Twilight. Twilight's natural inclination to bolt and run has raised its ugly head. It wasn't like she did with the other ponies at the Canterlot University. She didn't know well enough to dislike them. However, they seemed to know her, which was quite disquieting thing, as she never sought out any of them. The undergraduates looked up to her as Princess Celestia's personal student with the kind of awe usually reserved for celebrities in the off-campus world. They were nice enough, Twilight supposed, by the virtue of the fact that they were at the university. She knew who they would be studious and knowledgeable. Probably some of them had the ability to converse for more than 5 minutes about Star Swirl and the Burdid's theory of temporal relativity, or silver tongue at the gifted principles of historic mechanics. It was just that, well, after discussing those with one pony in all Equestria, who had actually met Star Swirl and Silver Tongue, talking with any pony else just seemed redundant. In other than magic, what else was she supposed to talk about with the other students with whom she had nothing else in common? Undaunted by the lukewarm, warm responses, the undergrads still often extend their invitations to things, though she suspected it less to do with her own reputation as life and soul of party, and more to do with the vague hope that she had, if they did, the princess herself might drop by, and who could blame them? Princess Celestia was beginning and the end of Twilight's social life since her brother went on his latest tour of duty. Shining armor, his kind words from the day she moved out of her family home and into the college campus, came back to her as if she was confronted with three of the four persistent students in the whole university. The location of their fourth member soon became apparent. Moondancer is having a little get-together in the west courtyard. You want to come? They all leaned over toward her eagerly. Twilight wasn't really great at reading facial cues or body language, but they seemed generally willing to include her. Nevertheless, her usual response hovered over her lips. Oh, sorry, girls, I've got a lot of studying to catch up on. Her saddlebag was heavy with the tomes she had been reading. It was only an old full storybook, with big pictures and simple language, but it had been useful to refamiliarize herself with some of the myths and legends in preparation for the essay she was planning on the Indo-Equestrian culture and manifestations of magic in literature. Her brain itched to get back to her room and task Spike with finding her more material on The Mare in the Moon. Don't avoid the social scene just because some dusty old book is calling your name. Shining Armor's parting words ran through her mind like a knell. Books don't get up and wander away just because you waited a few extra hours to read them. Have fun in other ways too, otherwise it'll be your school graduation ball all over again. The graduation ball, which Twilight had skipped because no pony asked her to go. Instead, Shining Armor found her in the bedroom at home, already going over the reading material for her college courses, even though they were still an entire summer away. That was several years ago now. She had blown through the courses faster than any pony ever before, her gaining a degree in the masters of half of the time they should have walked taken since then. She still got a little thrill to think that she had come so far, so fast that Princess Celestia herself was the only one who could teach her anything else these days. Well, about academia, at least, though she had imitated Twilight that can learn other things during her latest lessons. You should live life without regrets, Twilight. That brain of yours is big enough already. Don't let your heart shrivel up in the meantime, okay, Brainiac? The three ponies on the path looked at her. The book in her bag seemed to grow heavier. She would say no, and she wanted to look into the Genesis myth some more. She needed to cross-reference with the prophecy she had just read, with the more academic writers. She needed to. "Come on, Twilight," said the mayor who had spoken. "Don't you anything except to study?" Of course I do." Twilight clicked her hooves together in a voice that she only seemed a little hesitant. I'd love to come to the get together with you. I'd love to, yes." Why were they even looking at her so strangely? "Thank you?" "Cool, would you? You're gonna love it. It'll be awesome." They surrounded her, sweeping her along towards the west of the courtyard. Twilight had went along with them, smiling as they asked her surprisingly intelligent questions, mixed with effusive declarations of how much fun she was going to have and how pleased they would be to finally join in. High above them, Princess Celestia stood on her balcony and watched as her faithful student was whisked away. She smiled to herself. Those were good ponies, she knew. They were younger than Twilight, but they were just no bad thing. Youth could sometimes teach age with a great deal. Perhaps Twilight was finally going to make some friends after all, without the need to intervene more than just a few hints during lessons. On that next day, when the sun should have crested over the horizon, welcomed the summer sun celebration. It did not rise in Ponyville. Citizens froze in horror as their celebrations were invaded by a legend whom no pony recognized. In Canterlot, Twilight stared in the horror in the sky, dark, and neither she nor her friends had any idea what to do. "What were we to do? They're eating all of our food in town." Fluttershy's voice faded into the hubbub created by the chattering, festing little bugs currently laying waste to Ponyville's food stores. As if on cue, Applejack gasped, "My apples!" She galloped away, head-butting and bucking off ineffectively at the creatures that she headed out of town towards Sweet Apple Acres. "We've got to do something." Twilight racked her considerable brains for an answer. Getting rid of them was using the Earth Pony's methods hadn't worked. Neither that the Pegasus aerial tricks. The only one option should have been left was the most obvious. She fought as it arrowed to the front of her thoughts. Why hadn't she considered using the magic before? "I've got it!" Rainbow Dash, Fluttershy, and Rarity turned back to look at her expectantly. Of course they were expectant. She always knew what to do, even when she didn't. "I'll cast a spell to make them stop eating all the food," Twilight declared triumphantly. She bent on her forelegs and summoned the dieting spell she had learned years ago when her roommate at the academy asked for help to avoid the cream cakes before she outgrew her graduation robes. If she eyed the spell to affect their desire for all the foods, not just one type, that would surely make the bugs stop eating. Twilight's eyes popped open as another thought arrowed through, spitting the first and cold logic. If she stopped the bugs from eating food, that would make them stop eating entirely, or they would just start eating other things. Her roommate had successfully abandoned the cream cakes, but developed a terrible obsession with sprouts and cabbage, which had created the metaphor of the problem in their room until the end of the year, after Twilight discovered that she couldn't undo the spell. What if something similar happened now and she couldn't undo that either? She needed to rework the spell, and quickly. Concentrating, she shifted through the charm principles within the enchantment framework, adding a word magic seal for good measure. It was a clumsy spell casting her old teachers would have pursued her lips disapprovingly, but she was pushed for the time. "Stop eating Ponyville and the food within it," she said out loud. Her horn radiated with magically enhanced instruction in expanding the circle until it reached the town's limits. Even more bugs were vomiting up new versions of themselves there. Twilight gritted her teeth and pushed out extra power, grunting a little with the effort. Silence fell. Panting, Twilight had raised her head. Every bug hung in there wearing identical puzzled expressions. She watched with the bated breath as one approached the overturned bucket with a single apple still inside. The bug nibbled at the apple, ditched the idea with a disgusted noise, revolved around the bucket for a moment, and then flew away from that too. Twilight beamed success. "You did it, Twilight!" Fluttershy said with delight. Yeah, Rainbow Dash pumped her hoof. Now we could try rounding them up again, and don't worry about them eating Yonch. Twilight whirled to see Rainbow Dash shaking out of her hoof and glaring at the bug that had flown up to her. It weaved from the side to the side, as if hypnotized by her movements. The little kitten bit me. Ow! Rarity cried out. Ooh, get away, you horrid fiends! Ouch! Ow, 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 ow! She turned in circles, kicking out the creatures that were biting her haunches like gigantic fleas. Whatever the bit left a nasty red wheals on her white coat, except that the wheels didn't show through fur. Twilight realized Rarity had shrieked louder. The red marks on the skin and her fur were suddenly missing. Get them off of me! Get them off of me! Oh! Twilight tumbled out of the air. The bugs had started nesting in her mane, now fastened into her face and neck. Whatever she was trying to say vanished into gurgling whimpers. Twilight ran over to her, blasting the bugs away with raw magic. She didn't even bother weaving into any spell. To Twilight, Fluttershy stared at her with wide, shocked eyes. She was bleeding from dozens of tooth-shaped cuts. What's going on? Screams started to echo around Ponyville. Pony screamed out of the sugar cube corner, right where the bugs had been feasting on pastries, were now feasting on customers. Rose galloped past, shrieking at the buzzing mass that clamped onto her belly and chest. Caramel pawed on his head. There were several bugs that already reduced his mane to shreds and were starring on his scalp. Bonbon rose to her hind legs and tried to scrape off the bugs attached to Lyra's ears. They were now nothing more than stumps, only to fall back with a strangled scream at the free, burrowing happily into their own stomach with affable chitters. Twilight's left hind leg exploded in pain. She kicked out but stumbled when she tried to put her hoof down again. Why was it leg suddenly shorter than the others? A bug flew into her face, preventing her from being able to look and see what had happened. A sudden faceful of wings made her jump back, stagger, and fall to the side, her vision swimming with the entire hot agony crawling up to her haunch. She summoned more raw magic to her horn, and the sound of her friends' cries only slightly lessened by the bugs crawling into her ears. For her reverse spell had worked. They weren't eating Ponyville nor the food anymore. For the first time, Twilight wished one of her spells had failed. Come on now, Twilight Sparkle. Discord placed a cone on the head, just as he created the pink cloud above her head. Abruptly, the rain had been following her around for the past 4 seized hour, and the cloud morphed into delicious cotton candy. You've got to get into the spirit of things. Spirit of things? What spirit? She had failed every task she had tried to accomplish. Misery settled like a dead weight in her stomach. She had failed to prevent her friends from being corrupted, and then failed to save them afterwards. She had failed to find the elements of harmony until it was too late, and failed to implement them. She had failed to stop Discord from spreading his awful chaos, and failed to make even a dent in it, even with her most powerful spells. After her friends abandoned her outside her home, she had wandered around Ponyville trying to ever so more dejectedly to fix things, but to no avail. Like the infectious disease, chaos spread outward from Ponyville, as she could do nothing but curtail in its range. Most of all, she had failed to accomplish anything Princess Celestia had asked for. Equestria was doomed. Her teacher probably hated her for so many failures. Her friends would never be friends with her again, and her family would be ashamed of her. Who could possibly be proud of a daughter or sister who was big of a failure? She couldn't even figure out a simple riddle before it cost her everything she held dear. So much for Brainiac Sparkle. Shining Armor would probably call her something else now, if he ever spoke to her again. She couldn't even use her notorious intelligence to think up of a new nickname. She was pathetic. Discord licked up a massive clump of cotton candy with every sign he was enjoying it. Or maybe he was enjoying her misery. Maybe he would produce another cone and turn her into something more to be consumed. At least then she wouldn't feel so bad. After all, he continued, spreading his arms wide, this is your new home. Twilight looked around. Ponyville wasn't even a shell of itself. She felt sick. She had done this. It was all her fault. Her self-assurance had drained away, leaving her gray and washed out and a failure. Not anymore, she replied morosely. She took a few steps towards her home, which was at least still right side up. When she stopped, Spike was there. Spike had always had faith in her. She couldn't bear to face him now. She couldn't bear to face him or anyone else ever again. She could leave Ponyville, but what would be the point? The whole of Equestria was doomed, and it was her fault. Yes, Discord yelled gleefully, dancing like he had her all for happiness, as well as his own. Harmony is finally dead. His words reverberated in her ears, sinking into her mind and along her veins like poison to her wretched heart. Harmony wasn't dead. Not yet. Twilight turned and walked slowly back to the place where she had passed earlier. She had tried to magic every orchard of the bullfrog trees. Instead, she turned them all into operatic marshmallows. The confidentially choir gathered around the red and yellow branches of the chorus finally of attuned oohing and awing at the magic, taking a turn for dramatic as she headed up the incline that had not existed there yesterday. There didn't need to be used in any ravines in the middle of Ponyville. There certainly weren't any of the giant candy canes at the bottom. Twilight tried one last ditch of blast magic to turn them back into the meadow. The canes would be shattered into shards and stained of glass, and if she had summoned the windows from Canterlot Castle, she would see a reflection in pieces, a gray grim figure, no use to anyone anymore. Accompanied by a historic crescendo and Discord's maniacal laughter, Twilight jumped. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to go and comfort my bride. Shining Armor swept past Twilight. His expression was more obnoxious than she had ever seen it before. And you could forget about being my best mare. In fact, if I were you, he paused, if he couldn't quite believe he was saying to her either, I wouldn't show up to the wedding at all. Twilight gawked incredulously at his departing tale. Her big brother had sometimes got mad at her when they were foals, sure, but not like this. They had never truly fought before. Any sibling spats were cleared up quickly, and he had never, ever looked at her the way he had looked at her, like she was something he had stepped in of what he wanted to scrape off his hoof as soon as possible. He sank to her haunches in utter shock. How could this have happened? He was trying to protect him. The right ostraced himself from him. How could he not see that? Everything she had said had been because she loved her brother and wanted him to be safe. Okay, so she had been wrong on a few things. Okay, a lot of things, but her intentions had been good. That had to count for something, right? Right? Come on, y'all. Applejack could barely conceal her anger. Let's go check on the princess. Even her friends were mad at her? But she had been trying to do the good thing. Why was everything going wrong? Before any pony could see the tears in her eyes, Twilight leapt out to her hooves and galloped out the doors. She ran blindly, pulling up the short, when she heard voices ahead of her. Why does she hate me so much? Cadence sobbed. We used to be so close. Shh, it's okay, Shining soothed. Twilight doesn't hate you, sweetie. She's just a little overwrought, that's all. Overwrought is complaining about the color of the flowers in her mane or the length of her hemline. Cadence choked. She's going to ruin the wedding. Her sobs became muffled. No doubt Shining pulled her close and let her cry into his mane. Or maybe it was his chest. Maybe they were hugging. Loving couples hugged, didn't they? No, she won't, Shining said firmly. I won't let her. Twilight's heart lurched. She hurried out of the castle, avoiding the main corridors where she might meet the other ponies from the wedding. Instead, she escaped through one of the servant entrances by the kitchens, which emptied out into a side street. Once she vacillated for sure where to go. She couldn't go back to inside. She had been awful to Cadence and by corollary to Shining. She could have gained a sister, but instead she may have gained just lost of her brother. Choking back in her own sobs, Twilight picked up a direction and ran. Should she go home? Mom and Dad might understand. Or maybe they wouldn't because she explained to them what she had done. She couldn't spoil the wedding for them too. The sign for Canterlot Central Station loomed over her like an omen, and she had cantered gratefully towards it. She consulted the timetable and saw that the next train back to Ponyville was due to start out in 10 minutes. Fate seemed to agree with her with that it was time to leave. She charged the tickets to the royal account that they had been given codes for when they arrived to help organize the wedding. Princess Celestia would understand. Twilight cringed as she remembered the princess's expression when she had teleported around Cadence, throwing accusation at her like pieces of sharp gravel. Now she was steps away from the castle, and with Shiny's explanations ringing in her head, her suspicions seemed stupid. Her behavior on the other hoof was not just stupid but cruel. Help organize the wedding? No, help ruin it. Yes, Shiny was right. At the wedding would be better off without her participation. Twilight sat in the carriage as the train rattled its way out of the capital, not looking out of the window for once. Buoyed by the success of her anti-gravity spell, as well as not needing to use it to stop herself from falling on her head this time, Twilight stepped unthinkingly towards the crystal heart, immediately set her hoof on the light, on the blue star mosaic on the floor. A noise like the strangest sword in the world being unsheathed cut through the air. Not even the whistle of high altitude wind was enough to block out the distinctive noise of an alarm spell being triggered. She had a split second to act. Instinctively, she had leapt for the crystal heart. If she could just get out, everything would be okay. She would knock it off towards Spike, but he didn't know how to use it, and that would just make him a defenseless target. It was her responsibility to defeat Sombra. The crystal heart was the only thing that could defeat him, and if she could just go to it before whatever its magic she had triggered him just enough time to materialize. She grabbed the glowing crystal and held it to her chest. Gigantic black shards knifed up to the floor around her. They formed a ring, encasting her with it. On the other side, she had heard Spike cry out her name and the sound of a distant snarl. Unable to land on all four hooves, Twilight slid on her shoulders and fetched up one of the walls. She scrambled back at the cold spot, slippery, stinging wrongings of it. She had encountered the evil magic only a few times in her life and had known of it that she ever felt bad of the brief touch. She cowered in the center of the mosaic like frightened filly who could hear the bullies approaching hoofsteps. She only had a split second to act. Instinctively, she leapt for the crystal heart. If she could just get to it, everything would be okay. She could knock it towards Spike, but he didn't know how to use it then. But at the same time would just make him a grooming target. She grabbed the glowing crystal and held it to her chest. Gigantic black shards knifed up from the floor around her. They formed a ring, encasting her over within it. On the other side, she heard Spike cry out her name and the sound of the distant snarl. Unable to land on all four hooves, Twilight slid on her shoulders and fetched up one of the walls. She scrambled back to the cold, hot, slippery, stinging warmness with it. She had encountered the evil magic only a few times in her life, and none of it had ever felt as bad as the brief touch. She cowered in the center of the mosaic like a frightened filly who could hear the bullies approaching hoofsteps. King Sombra didn't make hoofsteps. He did, however, hiss like a demonic snake as his vaporous body seeped between the shards and reformed beside her. 4 armored hooves aligned it with the grace of a pony half his size and bulk. Twilight gasped and backed away, stopping only when her tail brushed through the opposite side again. The pain shot to the roots of her every hair, freezing her in place as she jumped away from it again. She was caught between them. She didn't want to get any closer to Sombra than she could help, especially since he was eyeing at the crystal heart, her inner hooves like a nasty snack. "Twilight!" Spike called out from somewhere behind Sombra. "Throw me the heart!" Sombra's head had snapped sideways, as if his ear had been bitten by a tick. He sneered, flicking a surprisingly solid hoof. Several horizontal shards heard slid from the vertical walls, even more spewing up from the floor around Twilight. Spike cried out again, this time in pain. The cry ended abruptly. "Spike!" Twilight called desperately. There was no response. The dread just washed over her, followed by pure rage. She felt the base of her mane begin to crackle as her fury swam up into her horn and began to manifest itself as it once itself out a cliff outside the foggy bottom. "You monster!" Sombra then stared at her competitively. It was far too calm an expression for the situation. His mouth curled into a smile that showed up with sharp white teeth. So far, Twilight had only ever heard him laugh. It was a dark, oily sound, but nothing compared to his voice when he actually spoke. "So much power for one so small," he murmured. His voice rolled over, trailing like a shiver that ran from her horn to her fetlocks. "So much potential. You're not like the others." He stepped forward towards her. Twilight held the crystal heart behind her back. "You can't have it." Sombra only smiled wider. Every available gap in the walls immediately filled with the obsidian shards, and a roof swooped on into the place above them. Twilight was left in darkness, lit only by the eerie green light of Sombra's eyes. They drew closer, though he still made the barest sounds with his hooves. This time she couldn't back away when she tried. Something sharp dug into her shoulder blades. "It is already mine," Sombra said. He actually purred, conscious with twisting together to lock his vowels, and solidly as he locked Twilight in his cage. "Has it always been mine? It will always be mine." "Not anymore," Twilight tried to say, to keep the tremble from her voice. "You won't win." Her friends would come. She kept that through the uppermost in her mind, using it as a shield against her rise in panic. If Sombra was in there with her, he couldn't be out detaining them. They would come to help her, but just as they had when she had been facing Nightmare Moon, they would soon get back in there in the nick of time. Just like the last time Sombra would be defeated, the Crystal Empire would be restored. Cadence would be fine, Shining's horn would soon be healed, and away they would all go home. All of them, including Spike, who might be hurt, but would certainly be fine with some medical magic. And in a flash of green, Sombra's eyes suddenly appeared directly in front of her own. His breath blew into her nostrils. It smelled like bonfire smoke, that earthly odor she had last smelt from the Diamond Dog tunnels when they were went to rescue Rarity. "But little pony," Sombra breathed. She didn't need to see his mouth to know what he was smiling. The crystal heart was priced in her grasp, though she tried to turn to keep a hold of it. She lit her horn to see the better just as something touched her right forehoof, lifting it above her head, presumably so she couldn't retrieve the heart. Something else traced her left shoulder, leaving the same cold, slippery, stinging, wrong feeling as the wall. The sensation paralyzed her. The light in her horn died. The touch moved to her stomach, and the small of her back, her flanks, and her hind legs. Her ears everywhere at once seemed lightly, like a cloud of smoke rolling over her. "I've already won," Sombra purred. The dark shards contained sound so well that not a single one of Twilight's screams escaped. What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, stay pretty.